Good afternoon. We will now go to the next sutra, which is on memory. But before going to the next sutra, I just want to say that I'm going to go back to the sutra on Vikalpa in one of the talks in the future, so that we can go through the different types of imagination. Right? So we'll talk about that again in some talk in the future. Now today's sutra is Anubhut Vishaya Asampramosha Smriti. Memory is not letting the objects of experience be stolen away. Right? Now, memory. Now we went through 4 sutras on the vrittis, the 4 vrittis, and this is the 5th vritti. Now, each of the vrittis will leave a memory. So if it is right knowledge, wrong knowledge, imagination, sleep, each will leave a different kind of memory. So memory is a collection of so many things, right? Real knowledge, wrong knowledge, illusory knowledge, everything comes in memory. Now, memory, we have to understand that the 5 senses, they are always in the present moment. So each moment of life, the 5 senses are taking a photograph of what is around them. And this photographic frame which goes in through the 5 senses, we call as the present moment. So we can't say that the 5 senses are in the present moment. The 5 senses create the present moment. Now, the mind attaches one frame with another frame and creates a line of time, creates a line of memory. So without this function of memory, there would be no continuity in our life. If I woke up in the morning, I wouldn't remember who had gone to sleep. It is memory that brings continuity from moment to moment. It is the thread which on which the, what do you call, the pearls of time, each present moment, are strung on the string of memory. The second thing is, Tauria Sahib used to say that memory can never die. So every thought, every impression, every sensation that is recorded inside never dies. You cannot be free in the from memory in the sense of destroying memory, but we can be free in the sense that there is a way to bypass memory. So we come to certain moments in our life where in those moments we are free of memory. Otherwise, it's very difficult. In these 24 hours, there's not a single moment when we are not controlled by memory. Memory, even though it brings continuity of time, continuity of events, when we progress on the path of yoga, most of the obstacles which come in are due to blocks in memory. We can also, extend this a little further and say that all diseases are the results of blocks in memory. Somewhere we are holding on to a memory which we should not be holding on to. And that what you call knot of memory is creating a poison somewhere, and those poisons are entering our body-brain system. Now let us go to the sutra. Anubhuta Vishaya Asampramosha Smriti. Memory is not letting the objects of experience be stolen away. Memory is the holding on to that which is known, which has been known. Okay, now let us go to the sutra. What is happening? Anubhuta Vishaya. 1 minute, 1 minute. Asampramosha.
There's echo coming.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Now we'll start with this word asampramosha. It's a beautiful word, really beautiful word. It comes from the root mush, to steal, to hold on to carry away. From the word mush, we have the word mushak, right? It means a rat or a mouse. We have a mouse for the computer, right? And we know that Ganpati's ride is also mushak. So it comes from the root mush, to steal, to carry away. Now just see the way he has coined this word. Asampramosha. Mush, to steal. Pramush. Pramush. Right? To go forward and steal, to go toward and steal. So we'll just say that it means to steal properly. To steal properly. So he first uses the word mush, to steal, and then he says pramush, to steal properly. And then he uses the word sam. Sam means in a balanced way to properly steal. Sam, properly steal. In a balanced way, properly steal. Or just to put it in colloquial language, we can say mush, to steal, pramush, to properly steal, and sam pramush, to properly steal. Right? And then he uses the word not properly steal. Right? So Anubhut Vishaya Asampramusha Smriti is memory, smriti. Now we must go into the root of the word smriti. It comes from smru, to remember, the power of recalling. Memory is not that which has been recorded. Memory is not that which has been stolen in a proper way, but memory is that which cannot be properly stolen because it can be recalled. The power of recalling is memory. The power to remember is memory. So this is the last vritti, the power to remember. Now, we must understand that as we rise in consciousness, our perception changes, and in that our experience of memory also changes. So we will say that there are two kinds of memory. One memory which is the pure memory, and one memory which is the corrupted memory. Supposing I go for a, what do you call, outing somewhere or a picnic somewhere, and next day I meet you and you ask me, what did you do in the picnic? What were you doing there? So I will recount the events of the picnic, but I won't recount them exactly the way they were. And I don't realize this because I'm doing this mechanically. My self-love will color my recounting of the picnic. So when I recount something, I will say, okay, they forgot to bring the box of salt and pepper, but I had a box of salt and pepper in my bag and I gave it to everybody. So in everything, every event that I will be recounting to you, there will be some coloring of I added, as if I want the events of that picnic to look good upon me. I hope I'm coming across it. There are a lot of lights over there. So whenever we recount from memory, we don't recount it, recall the memory. We don't recall it in the exact way it happened. We are always adding, subtracting something to make ourselves look better in a better light, you can say, right? Supposing I go through a car accident and you ask me what happened in the car accident, then I will recount the events in a way which put a better light upon me. I'll say, oh, I was just saved by the car accident. A little more and I would have died in that car accident, you see. And I'll recount the events of that car accident. So the original memory, I'm putting a layer of corruption upon that original memory. I hope you're understanding this. Just give me a thumbs up if you're understanding this. Yes. So we don't have real memory, but the real memory is there somewhere deep inside us, the pure, pristine memory. And at a higher state of consciousness, we can contact that pure memory. In a normal state, in our mechanical state, it is very difficult because every time we recount the memory, we are corrupting it more. There's a very famous story of Socrates. Socrates was dying and his disciples were around him. And his wife, Xanthippe, was crying. So Socrates asked his wife, why are you crying? You could not stand me for 1 second throughout our married life. Right? She always was a tortured Socrates. And it is said that she threw boiling water upon him and he had all those pock marks in his face because she threw boiling water upon him. And it was because of, to escape from his wife, that Socrates would go on the terrace, look at the sky, and in that looking of the sky, somewhere he merged and he became one with something higher. So he's telling his wife, why are you crying? You should be happy, right? That I'm going, you could not stand me for 1 moment. And don't think this is the story of Socrates. I can recount real life stories also, right? And the wife is saying, that he tells his wife that after I'm gone, you're going to tell people what a good life I had with Socrates. Now, how it's so difficult to live without Socrates, and in how much of pain and sorrow I am. And that whole memory of that torture, which was the real memory, you will corrupt it by overlaying another, what do you call, film upon it. And it happens in real life. I mean, a husband and wife can't stay together. But so the husband dies young, and suddenly the wife, who couldn't stand him for 1 moment, creates Facebook pages for him and all kinds of memories for him, as if she cannot live without him. You see, and this happens in life. Every moment we are corrupting memory, and the more we corrupt memory, right, the more it becomes sort of disintended inside of us. So there is a real memory which we can only access at a higher state of consciousness. And there is the memory which is in our everyday life, and that memory gets corrupted every time. Right? Now, the power to recall, smriti, the power to recall. What in us, what practice in us can we do to increase the power of recalling? Because in the end, Gurdjieff calls that as self-remembering. You have to remember your original self. So in the end, the whole spiritual journey is nothing but the power of recall. Right? So how do we increase the power of recall? What destroys the power of recall? What destroys? We must ask ourselves this question. And we will see that it is light which destroys the power of recall. So, supposing I'm going to die on the verge of death, and suddenly I'll see a lot of light just before I die. Of course, we've gone through this on the talk on death, so I won't say what it is. But that light, it erases the memory of this life as I pass on to something else. So it is light which erases memory. Supposing the child is in the mother's womb and the child comes out of the mother's womb and opens his eyes, his or her eyes, and light comes in, those 9 months of memory of the mother's womb is erased the minute light comes in. Light erases memory. It doesn't erase it completely. It is lying there at some place, but then to access it, there you have to do hard work to access it. Say we go to sleep in the night and we wake up in the morning. Now, if we don't open our eyes, then we can easily recall 1 or 2 dreams. But the minute we open our eyes and light goes into our eyes, right, it erases the memory of the night. Right? And we say, oh, definitely there was some dream, but I can't remember it. So the power of recall has to be practiced in darkness. So it cannot be practiced in light, the power of recall. Now, one of the, techniques which Tawariya Sahib gave us was what we call as palming, right? So we would put the hollow of our hands, put the eyes inside, hands very soft, and we would look at the darkness inside. Try to penetrate the darkness inside. Simultaneously, at the same time, we would try to relax all the muscles around the eyes, around the nose, the cheek, the lips, the inner muscles of the face. We keep on relaxing the muscles in the face and let our attention penetrate into the darkness over there. And if we can do this for 5 minutes every day, then our power of recalling, will increase manifold. It's a very, very powerful exercise. Not only does the power of recalling increase, but Tawariya Sahib used to tell us that just by doing this for 5 minutes every day, so many memory patterns, so many sanskars which have not been used for some time will start dropping away. And so that 5-minute exercise of looking into the darkness and relaxing the face muscles deeper and deeper will lead us to a very high state of consciousness. Very simple exercise. because it gets rid of the patterns which are veiling the consciousness, covering the consciousness, and the relaxing opens up so much within us, so many parts of the brain which are lying in suspension now, not in non-use now, will start opening up just in this simple exercise. So to increase our power of recall, and because it's very important, we must do this small exercise for 5 minutes every day. Now, when we went into the sutra of Viparyayo of Mithya Jnanam, sorry, of Vikalpa, can you just go to the sutra of Vikalpa? No, Vikalpa. Shabda Jnana Anupati Vastu Shunya Vikalpa. Shabda Jnana Anupati Vastu Shunya Vikalpa. So here Patanjali has used the word Vastu Shunya. Vastu. Sorry, Vastu Shunya. In Gujarati we call it Vastu, but Vastu Shunya was Vikalpa. Now we go back to the Sutra on memory. Anubhut Vishaya. So in that sutra, he is using the word Vastu or Vastu, and in this sutra, he is using the word Vishaya. What is the difference between a Vastu, what do you call a thing, and an object of experience? What is the difference? And this is important. Pin this on the side, right? I hope I'm coming across in this, right? So, supposing I use the Gujarati word Vastu, not the Hindi, what do you call it, Sanskrit Vastu, right? Supposing I have a beautiful painting and I keep that painting in my safe deposit locker. It may be a very valuable painting. And that painting does not become an experience for anybody. It does not become a vishay for anybody. Then it is a vastu, it is a thing, it is an object. In another way, we can say that that painting is not taking part in the drama of life. It is not taking part in the drama of life. Supposing I have money in my safe deposit locker, which I don't use, then that money is not taking part in the drama of life. That is vastu. But if that painting is in my sitting room and people come and experience that painting, from vastu it becomes vishaya. Am I coming across with this? It is now taking part in the drama of life. People come, they enjoy the painting, or they may even not like the painting, doesn't matter, but it is taking part in the drama of life. So that the vastu is something which is dead. It is lying there in my safe deposit locker, right? And vishaya is something which is of a higher vibration because people are experiencing it, people are enjoying it, it is taking part in the drama of life. So here he's not used the word vastu, he's used the word anubhuta vishaya. Those things which give an experience, anubhut, which give an experience. So if we go a little deeper into this, there are 5 vishayas. Shabda of the ear, sparsha of the skin, rupa of the eyes, rasa of the taste glands, and gandha smell. These are the 5 vishayas. So when he's talking about memory, it is not just the memory of the object, it is the experience which I'm going through at this moment. You get it? So he's saying Anubhuta Vishaya, holding on to that, so it's not stolen, but allowing the recall, right? The power of recalling that is Smriti. Now the word is in past tense, Anubhut, something which has already been experienced. Now, let's try to put it in another way. That I meet you, and in meeting you, I am passing through an experience of friendliness. So what he is saying is that experience of friendliness is being held on inside and can be recalled. He's not talking about my meeting you. I don't know if I'm coming across with this. Or I meet you, and maybe I have some old enmity with you or something with you. So what do you call, I'm in this moment, I am experiencing hatred, right? So what am I experiencing in this moment? And later on, when he goes deeper into the Yoga Sutra, he will show how these experiences become sanskar, they become memory patterns. So we must work upon our power of recalling. And I would advise everybody that please do not open your eyes when you wake up in the morning. Keep your eyes closed. Try to recall at least one dream before getting up. Please practice this. And if you get time, do the palming exercise which Tawariya Sahib has shown. Right? Now we go a little deeper into this. Is memory an electrical current in the brain? But that electrical current is conditioned to move backwards. Does the future happen, or do we remember the future? Right? So when we talk of time, from birth to death, we talk of time as a straight line. And all the events that happen between my birth and death, they come in this straight line. No, straight line first. Right? Birth to death. Just B and D you can put. And all the events come in this. But this is our way of understanding time. But in the universe, there is nothing like a straight line. Right? Even when what you call geometry was conceived, suppose there is a point, and if the point moves, it becomes a line. Right? But in the universe, there's nothing like a straight line. So time is not a straight line. Time is a circle. And if we move from birth to death, and that point of entry and exit is the same. Why is the point of entry and exit the same? Why is it the same point? We relate through time, not through time, but through space. So when I say I'll meet you tomorrow, I'm actually putting you away in space. I am talking about time as if it is space. But if I take time as energy, then the energy of birth is the energy of death. So the very energy of birth is the energy of death. So I experience it once, unless I consciously am able to experience that energy by making conscious effort in my life. I experience the energy of death before death. It's a different matter, right? So time is this circle of life. Now, if I rise at the moment of death, if I have risen in a state of consciousness from the point in which I entered, then I go out into a higher cycle, the point being the same, but it is a spiral. Will you be able to show it? You get it? So it looks like the same circle, but I have risen a little above because I have the consciousness at the moment of death is more than the consciousness with which I was born. I hope I'm coming across in this. So man is born in a certain state of consciousness, but through daydreaming and through imagination, he lives so mechanically that the moment of death, he has not risen, but he has fallen. And fallen, he may be very rich. He may be one of the richest people in the world, or he may be a very powerful person. He may be a very famous person. It makes no difference. He has fallen from what he was born with, because he has not collected any consciousness in this life. So then death goes in the same circle in which we were born. And then I don't remember, future is not future, future is memory. But because the the electrical current of memory has been conditioned to move in the past, I cannot understand why it cannot move in the future. I don't know if I'm coming across in this. Right? I'm just that in our mechanical state, we can remember the future. There is no new future for us because time keeps on moving in its same path. It's like time is a big building, and I'm born in the same room every time. I don't change my floor. I don't change my room. But if I rise in consciousness at the moment of death, then I change the floor on which I'm born. Last time I was born on this floor. Now I'm born on this floor. And this makes a difference. Then the circle is the same. Try to understand. Anubhuta Vishaya Asampramosha Smruti. The circle is the same, but now there will be a difference. This is what Christ calls the power, the law of eternal return. Of course, the Christians don't believe in recurrence or reincarnation. But here he has called this the, what do you call, law of eternal return. So what will that law of eternal return mean? Draw the circle again, please. Now, we draw a circle of time. Right? Now, say at this point, I got angry. Now, if I'm born in the same room and I return to this point, I'm going to get angry maybe with more intensity because the repetition will increase the intensity. But now supposing I move up in a spiral and I come back to this point because the circle is going round and I come back to this point, but there is some difference between the old circle and this circle because it is a spiral. Even though the point is the same, I will get angry, but the level of anger will be much less than what it was last time. Can you see? This whole circle is filled with Anubhuta Vishaya. This whole circle is nothing but experiences that have been experienced. And either I repeat the same circle or I move to a higher circle, the experiences will be the same, the intensity will change, and a point will come when some experiences will fall away completely. I hope I'm coming across with this. So the memory, because memory is conditioned to go backwards, the electric current is conditioned to go backwards. As we rise in consciousness, we break this conditioning and the electric current moves forward and we remember the future. We sort of like have a shadow today of what is going to happen tomorrow. And it is in this that we sow the seeds of consciousness. So I just wanted to talk on this. So we'll just have a summary of the 5 vrittis. We'll just go to them. Summary. And the first was right knowledge. And we said there were 3 kinds of right knowledge. Pratyaksh, in front of the eyes. Anuman, inference. And Agam, the words of people who have before being enlightened people, their words. Right? Anuman, Agam. Right? Second was wrong knowledge, which was based on wrong deduction. I saw the rope but thought it was a snake. Third was imagination, right? And even there was no rope also, but I imagined a snake could be there, right? Imagination. Fourth was sleep. I'm looking at something which is not there. You come to meet me. I say, why has your wife not come with you? I'm not looking at the presence. I'm looking at the absence. Abhav pratyay alamban vritti nindra. Right? And the last is smriti, memory. Right? Somebody has told me a snake will be there. Right? And it is from memory. So these 5 vrittis, it is these 5 waves which don't allow us to be in the present moment, right? It is identification with these waves. So when we break this identification with these waves, the seer comes into his own form. Tada drashtuhu swarupe avastha. If he is not in his own form, then he has taken the form of one of these waves. Vritti sarupyam itaratra. He has become that wave. So now we have gone through the 5 vrittis and we said that each of the vrittis could be klishta or aklishta. Klishta means painful, aklishta means not painful. Some memories are very painful and some memories are very happy memories, right? Not painful, right? So klishta and aklishta. Another meaning we took of klishta and aklishta, in which there is the seed of repetition, klishta, right? In which there is a klesh. Later on, we will go through the kleshas, and some memories are without any klesha. There is no seed of repetition. Supposing you have deceived me for some money or something of that sort, then the thought of you keeps on coming in my mind, or he or she took away my money, he or she took away my money. Even if I don't want that thought, it comes in my mind. And every time it comes, it creates a more intensity of repetition. It is a clished memory, right? It is a painful memory, right? So each of these vrittis can be painful or not painful, or they can have the seed of repetition, or they can be free of the seed of repetition. So this was just the 5 vrittis. We'll now go to the next sutra. Abhyasa vairagya bhyam tannirodha. By the practice of abhyas and vairagya, the 5 kind of vrittis can be paused. Teacher Tauriya Sahib has what you call translated abhyas as tireless endeavor. Tireless endeavor. And vairagya as non-attachment. Now we just any normal activity in life. Suppose we just talk about this in a very, what you call, light way first. Any normal activity in life, it moves in a certain cycle of activity and a period of rest. Right? Supposing I am going to climb a mountain, then there'll be some activity, then I'll stop for some time and I'll rest. Then again, there'll be some activity, again, I'll stop for some time and rest. And this is the law of life. This is the law of life. Everything does not move in a continuous upward movement. Everything does not move in a continuous downward movement. There is activity and there is rest. So we can say abhyas as activity, vairagya as rest. Or as my teacher used to say, that which takes us to a higher state of yoga, those practices, those attitudes, those habits, which take us to a higher state of consciousness, by practicing those, repeating those is called abhyas. And those excitements which seduce our attention, which take us to a lower state of consciousness, which take us deeper into mechanical life, those inducements which take us into the deeper state in life, more mechanical state in life, they have to be left consciously. They have to be dropped consciously. That is vairagya. Right? So that which takes us higher to practice that is abhyas, and that which pulls us down and takes us lower, to just drop that and stay away from that is vairagya. So we can say that this, what do you call, beautiful eagle of yoga, the two wings of the eagle which let us fly and soar in the sky of consciousness, those two wings are abhyas and vairagya. They are the two wings of yoga. And there must be a continuous balancing between the two. It is not that if you're in one, there is not the other. There's a continuous balancing between the two of them. Now, let us go a little deeper into the word. Abhi means towards. As means to throw towards. Now, one of my gurus was Swami Ram Dulare, and I spent 7 years with him. And he used to, anybody who would come and they would sit and talk to him, and he would say, "What is your aim? Tumhara lakshya kya hai? What is your aim? Is your aim to rise in consciousness?" Right? So then aim, abhi, towards, aim, us to throw towards the aim, to throw the inner arrow of attention towards our aim. This is the, what you call, meaning of the word abhyas. To throw the, what you call, the inner arrow of attention towards our aim. You know, in the Mahabharata, there is the, what do you call, game of dice. I don't know if everybody, I hope they know about the Mahabharata, the game of dice. And in the game of dice, the Pandavas lose everything. Right? And now to come back to a state where they can fight the 101 enemies, the Kauravas. They can fight the 101 enemies, the Kauravas. They have to spend 12 years of preparation. Now, right? So if we want to fight our inner battle, because we have these 101 enemies inside of us, there must be 12 years of preparation. 12 years is just a token. I mean, you have to understand it in that sense. And the beauty is this 12 years of abhyas. 12 years of abhyas. And what threw them out of the kingdom? What throws us out of the kingdom of heaven? That is excitement. Excitement. So when a child grows up and he comes to around the age of 14, 15, the sex energy, which was always lying dormant within the child, suddenly starts expressing itself. And the child, the game of dice happens in the, what do you call, in the life of the child. The game of dice in the sense that once this sex energy expresses itself, the child becomes a victim of excitement. Right? So so you'll see after I'm 15 or 16, of course, it's passed long ago, but I will say, oh, is there going to be a new movie in the theater? I want something exciting, right? Or who is throwing a party today? Or what is happening? What new is happening? We are always searching for excitement. And excitement banishes us from the spiritual kingdom. It banishes us from the spiritual kingdom. So when the sex energy takes over in our lives, the game of dice is thrown, right? And the game of dice, and we are banished from the kingdom of Indraprastha. Indraprastha is the whatever kingdom of the five senses. We are banished from that kingdom. We cannot, because of excitement, now we find it so difficult to live in the present moment. We tell the person, okay, you practice meditation. It is impossible. He's looking for new excitement. What is he going to practice meditation? Can you, I hope I'm coming across it. And this is represented in the Mahabharata, right? Suddenly, now if he wants to come back to the spiritual kingdom, he has to create new habits, conscious habits. The habits which are taking him mechanically towards excitement have to be replaced by conscious habits which take him towards a deeper sensitivity of life, not sensitiveness of life. And this takes 12 years. So the Pandavas, they go into and they create new habits in one of, and you see Arjun goes to the heavens and gets weapons and etc., right? And so they create new conscious habits to fight off the old, what do you call, habits of excitement which have taken over the kingdom. And it's very beautiful in the sense that for 11 years they create new habits, and 1 year they go into what you call Agnat, right? And this is very important for every spiritual seeker, because we do some practices and we do some meditations, we do this, we do that. But there is always the I, that I am doing meditation. There is always the I, that I am doing this practice. And so after 11 years of preparation, when they are ready, there is 1 year of dropping the I, going into Agnat, dropping the I, which did the meditation. And now even the I which meditated, that I dissolves in that. So this is how Abhyas is represented in the Mahabharata. 12 years of Abhyas to come back to fight those. And every time those 101 inclinations of the Kauravas come, we practice Vairagya. We don't allow it to go further. So Abhyas and Vairagya, they are the two, practices which take us to that higher state. So he says, Abhi, towards, us, to throw, to always throw towards your aim. Now, my aim is to rise in consciousness. And, but each big aim contains many smaller aims. And that smaller aim is in the present moment, which throws towards our big aim, to the bullseye in the big aim. Can you know? Abhyas. Abhi, us. Right? To throw towards that big aim. Remember some years ago, there was a lot of repairs going on in Bombay airport. And I had a very early flight to catch. And I'd come pretty early, 1.5 hours early. But there was, because of the repairs, there was a very long line for your security. And then, as is the case everywhere, you know, people know people and people know people and known people know other people. So there are always people coming ahead in your line, right? And it disturbs us inside that I have been standing for so long and somebody with some influence is coming ahead in the line. And I'm sure all of us have experienced this, right? Now, in this moment, if I give in to the negativity, then it is not Vairagya. The negativity is trying to pull me. Am I coming across in this, right? So that they have no right to come in front. I've been standing for so long. What is the point in standing? So all these thoughts can come and those thoughts can pull me down. But I said to myself, this is one of the best moments in my life. I told the monkey up there, if you speak another word, I'm here in the middle of the line, I'll go to the end of the line. And that 1 hour till I got my place for the security, the monkey did not say a single word. No complaining, no doing. So this is Abhyas. This moment in life is there. Do you want to throw it to your higher aim of consciousness, or do you want to fall into a lower level of consciousness? The minute we complain about something, we've fallen. I don't know. Have I come across in this? So we have a higher aim to reach a higher state of consciousness. But every moment in our life, we have to create a new aim which throws towards that higher state of consciousness. That practice is called Abhyas. That practice is called Abhyas. And it is something which goes on with us. And then we create a knack for it within us. Every situation, we create a knack for moving into a higher state. Tan Nirodha, that Nirodha, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, that state of Nirodha can be attained by Abhyas and Vairagya. Now, within Abhyas, there is a sense of continuity that we keep on trying to hit the same target. Right? We keep on trying to hit the same target. Now, one of the things which, you know, we used to learn the refining exercises and the 3-step rhythmic breathing. And every day, Mr. Tavaria used to tell us that 7 minus 1 is 0. You can't miss for a single day the exercises. So then one day we were sitting and I said, the exercises repeat every day. And he looked at me like this. When did the exercises repeat? We don't repeat anything. Every day you're doing the exercises fresh. Every day you're doing the exercises for the first time. Nothing, there is no repetition. There is no repetition. It says that is abhyas. If you have repeated it, it is not abhyas. Even though we are repeating the same thing every day, we are doing it as if we are doing it for the first time. That is abhyas. So there is a sense of repeated action, but the sensitivity inside is I'm doing it for the first time. It's fresh, new for the first time. Vairagya. The normal translation is non-attachment. It comes from V, to be away. Now we can take the to be away from rag. We'll take this as the simple meaning. To be, and rag means coloring. Rag means coloring. Or we can go a little deeper and say to stay away from that which attracts or repels. So it would be V away, Raj to attract, and a suffix Ya, Vairagya. Tan means tada, of those vrittis, of those vrittis. So I don't know if any of you have read Ravi Shankar's biography. It's called My Music, My Life. Beautiful book. And in that, somebody asks him the definition of raga. And he says, that which colors the mind is raga. So when the mind gets colored, our attention gets identified with that, and not allowing the attention to get identified is Vairagya. Now try to understand this. Vairagya does not mean leaving your home. Vairagya does not mean wearing orange clothes, right? Going and staying in a forest or in the ashram or something of that sort. Supposing you have to pick me up one day and we have to go out somewhere. And of course, tomorrow again, we have to go out somewhere. And you come with a new beautiful car or something, very luxurious car to pick me up, something which I've never seen. And you take me for a ride in your car. We go to wherever we are supposed to go. And then you come back and drop me. Now, at the moment of dropping, if the thought comes in my mind, tomorrow you come with the same car and pick me up, drop that thought, that is Vairagya. But I say, oh, I don't sit in a luxurious car, I'm a sadhu. That is not Vairagya. I don't know if I'm coming across in this. Can you understand? So that thought of repetition which comes in my mind, which is coloring my mind, attaching my mind to that you please come tomorrow and pick me up in the same car, that the very dropping of that thought is Vairagya, right? But if I say, oh, I only wear orange clothes and I don't sit in a car, that is not Vairagya. And this, we have to be very clear on this point. So he's saying that state of Nirodha, Tad Nirodha, that state of Nirodha can be achieved by abhyas, keeping on throwing towards your aim, keeping on moving towards your aim, abhyasa, towards the aim, and vairagya, not allowing yourself to be attracted or distracted or repulsed by anything, or we can say not getting attached to any coloring. So in normal life, there are so many negativities which pull our attention, from matters of worrying, from what is going to happen in the future. So we use our free will to drop the cycle of worry. That is vairagya. So we saw this sutra, Abhyasa Vairagya Abhyama Tannirodha. And we will see that in the practice of Vairagya, there is a amount of will involved, amount of saying no to something. So, and this practice of saying no is the practice of non-identifying, right? So I can see that anger is coming within me. I say no to the anger, vairagya. I can see that the thoughts of jealousy are coming within me. I say no to them, right? It's vairagya. So I can see that thoughts of controlling my son or controlling my wife are coming within me. I say no to them, vairagya. And I keep on trying to reach a state of chitta vritti nirodha abhyasa. So these two things go together. Keep on going into chitta vritti nirodha and dropping that which takes me away from chitta vritti. Abhyasa vairagya bhyama tan nirodha. And because of that, will grows, the power to say no, will grows within us. Later on, this power we will talk as yam, niyam, etc. But the power to say no goes with it. And this is not willpower, this is spiritual will. There's a difference between willpower and spiritual will. In willpower, I want to change you. In spiritual will, I accept you exactly as you are without any complaints or anything. Right? There's total acceptance in spiritual will. Now we'll take one more sutra today. Tatra sthito yatna abhyasa. Now, tatra is an adverb which means there. Yatna abhyasa. Yatna means prayatna, the effort. Now we can also take the meaning of tatra as of these two. Of these two, that is abhyas and vairagya, of these two, Patanjali is saying now I am talking about abhyasa. And what is abhyasa? The continuous practice to be in that state of chitta vritti nirodha. To restrain the vrittis, to be in that state. So the first meaning of tatra we will take of these two. But then there's the deeper meaning of the word tatra, and that is there. We'll just go into that meaning. Sthito, standing there, in that state, in that sthiti. Or we can say we are standing in that state, we are standing physically, psychologically, emotionally in a certain stable state. Or we can use the English word, we are standing stable and established in that steady state, right? So there, Where there? Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Now, this word tatra, it could mean there, it could mean anything. There, is he saying chitta vritti, or see the sutras which go there, or the sutra which is going to follow there, right? So we are standing in this sutra, tatra sthito yatna abhyasa, right? So yatna prayatna abhyasa, to remain steady in that state. And there, now, so there could mean the previous sutras, or it could mean the sutra following, right? Now, the previous sutras, is he talking about abhyas is chitta vritti nirodha? Is he talking about abhyas as drashtu swarupe avasthanam? And in the next sutra, he's saying you have to practice for a long period of time, satu dirgha kale, which we are going to take next time, the next sutra. Or is he talking about that? What he has not mentioned, he has not, what do you call, clarified this there. Now, supposing we just put this on the side for a moment, and we look at Gurdjieff's coining of the word self-remembering, the coining of the word self-remembering. That the whole spiritual practice is nothing but self-remembering, to reach a state of self-consciousness. Now, what constitutes self-remembering? In this moment, what goes into self-remembering? So three things go into self-remembering. One is my attention. If my attention is in a state of identification, right? If it is identified, attached to anything, then I cannot be in a state of self-remembering. So the attention must be free. The attention must be free. So the first part of self-remembering is attention. Where is your attention? Is your attention stuck somewhere? Is your attention colored by something? Is your attention attached to something? Then we cannot be in a state of self-remembering. So to be in a state of self-remembering, the first thing we have to see is that our attention is free. It is not in a state of identification. The second thing is that, am I present? Is there presence inside? And to know that there is presence inside, a little bit of attention has to go in. So there must be double-arrowed attention. Double-arrowed attention. Right? I don't know if you remember in school, we used to have roll call and somebody said our name. We would, for that moment, we would be present, even though because of the name, right? We would be present. There is the feeling of coming into the present. This feeling of what comes in the present is presence. And for that, there has to be a little attention upon that. So the second part of self-remembering is presence. First part is free attention, non-identification. The second part of self-remembering is, are you present? Are you there? Or are you traveling somewhere else? You know, one of the very beautiful texts in our scriptures is the Bhagavad. And the Bhagavad is the story of Krishna as a child and what happened with Krishna as a child. And it says that Krishna was born in this bhumi called Vraj Bhumi. Vraj means that land where the cattle are straying and eating grass. Charu, I don't know what we call it Hindi. Charan, jo kehte. Is it charan in Hindi? I don't know what we call it in Hindi. But where the cattle are grazing, So attention is everywhere. The cattle are all over the place and attention is everywhere. And suddenly Krishna is born and the gopis are singing that Krishna, with your birth, you have come into this land of Vraja, and this land of Vraja has suddenly become one. All that was grazing all over the place has become one. And it's there in this Bhagavad. So is our attention grazing everywhere, or is our attention free? And is our attention, on the presence inside? When there is presence inside, suddenly attention becomes free. It is not grazing everywhere. It has not gone all over Vraj Bhumi. And that presence inside is Krishna. So minute Krishna comes into the body-brain system, the cattle which were grazing everywhere, all over the place, suddenly they all come together, right? So the attention comes together. And the third part of self-remembering is my aim. Do I remember my aim? In this moment, what is my aim? Is that aim taking me towards a higher state of consciousness? So self-remembering constitutes of three things: attention, free attention, sensitivity of presence inside, and the third thing, remembering the aim, recalling the aim, remembering the aim. And the aim could be just a small aim of not having a thought for 5 seconds, right? Just a very small aim. But in this moment, when they all three come together, then we are in a state of self-remembering, which Gurdjieff calls. Right? Now, we are going to take this to help us to understand this sutra. In the second sutra, he says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. In the third sutra, he says tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. And in the sutra after this, that is in the 14th sutra, he will talk about abhyas, sa tu dirgha kale. That abhyas has to be done for a long period of time. So now let us bring these three together and let us see what Patanjali is talking about when he uses the word tatra, there. There is chitta vritti nirodha, there as in drashtu swarupe avasthanam, there as in to do it for a long time, sa tu dirgha kale. What does he mean by the word there? So when he's talking about chitta vritti nirodha, he's saying free your attention. Don't allow the attention to be identified with any vritti. So he's talking about the first step in self-remembering. Don't get identified with any vritti. Then he says, drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. Hold the presence inside. Hold the presence inside. And what should be the aim? Sa tu dirgha kale. Try to hold the presence inside and try to hold your free attention for as long a few moments of time, maybe a few minutes, few seconds, whatever. Sa tu dirgha kale. Hold it for a long. That should be your aim. When these three come together, Gurdjieff calls it as self-remembering. I hope I'm coming across in this. It's so, I mean, when he's used this word tatra over here, is so mysterious. What is he talking about? Right? So he's talking about all these three things together. And these three are the three bases of our spiritual growth. In this moment, where is my attention? In this moment, am I holding presence inside? And in this moment, where is my aim? If I was to, last time I took the name of a Sufi teacher, Mushtaq Ali, if I was to quote his terminology, he would say, attention, presence, and intention. Where is your intention? Where is your intention? Right? Where is your aim? In this moment, to hold my free attention and to hold my presence for as long a moment as possible. Satu dirgha kale. But that will come in the next sutra, and we'll take that next time, right? So he's saying tatra sthito yatna abhyasa. So the first meaning we took of tatra, of these two, I am talking about abhyasa. And the deeper meaning of the word tatra he took, which he has taken, is their meaning previously, their meaning following, and we took 3 sutras which come into the meaning of that there. And what is abhyas? Abhyas in this moment is freeing my attention, holding my present, and remembering my aim. That is the meaning of the word abhyas. Tatra sthito. Sthito is this state of chitta vritti nirodha, drashtu swarupe avasthanam, satu dirgha kala. When these 3 come together, that sthito, that state, to be steady in that state, that is called abhyas, the practice of being steady in that state. I hope I've come across in this. I mean, it's this sutra is so beautiful. I don't know, you know. Now, as we practice this, and as we practice this, over a period of time, it will become like effortless. Initially, we will have to practice freeing the attention. We'll forget, if we are trying to free the attention, we'll forget to hold the presence, right? And then we'll come to a state where all 3 will just come into a kind of harmony, and we'll be able to practice them without any effort. And that is the moment where we progress in our spiritual journey very fast. So, what do you call? First, we will practice doing it. Then we will practice staying in it, right, for a longer period of time. And then we will live in that state. Then we will live in that state. And it is these 3 sutras which will come together when he's saying tatra. He's talking about them. Sthito, the word comes from the word stha, to stand. Stand. And we use that first in the word avasthanam, to stand. Now he's talking about tatra sthito yatna. Yatna means prayatna. The effort to be in that state, right? All these 3 together, to be in that state, is abhyas. Right? Now, what is right effort? What is right effort? We must understand this. Anything we do for life is not right effort. Supposing I'm very fat, right? And I go to a doctor. Doctor, I want to get rid of some weight and all that. And the doctor says, okay, you've got to walk 1 hour every day. And you've got to walk fast 1 hour every day. But doctor, I do so much of walking in the whole day. I go up and down the stairs. I do this, I do that, right? So there's no need of walking. I walk more than 1 hour every day. Why should I go for a walk? I'll tell the doctor. And the doctor will say, that does not count. That does not count. You go up the stairs to do some work. You go down the stairs to get something, have your lunch or whatever aim you want to have. But that has nothing to do with your fatness, your obesity, right? If you want to reduce your weight, you have to go for a walk only to reduce your weight. You cannot count how many times you went up and down in the stairs in the day. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? So, right effort. What is right effort? I do a lot of effort in life. I do effort to earn money, right? I do effort to be a good father. I do effort to have a comfortable place to live in. But that effort does not count. that effort does not count. Now here there is a small, what do you call, characteristic which we have to add over here. Spiritual effort is an effort which is not necessary for life. Yeah, so he's talking about right effort, right? I may put in a lot of effort to earn money, right? But the effort to free my attention, the effort to hold my presence is an effort which I don't need in life. To earn money, I don't have to be present inside. I don't have to be in a higher state of consciousness. It is absolutely not necessary. On the contrary, if I'm more mechanical, I may earn more money. Right? If I try to be conscious while I'm earning money, I may lose money also. So to fulfill my life aims, I don't need to rise in consciousness. So the effort which I put into my spiritual effort is a very different effort from that which is needed from life. And that is the characteristic. So first of all, what is the root cause of my effort? It cannot come from life. Like in one of the talks, we talked about linear time and what do you call vertical time. All life efforts come from linear time. Tomorrow I want to earn money, right? Tomorrow I want to be a better person. Tomorrow I want to do this. But spiritual efforts come from vertical time. So those, if I say these efforts won't do, has to be a different effort. And many times I may lose something in life to rise to a higher state of consciousness. You know, some years ago, when I started teaching the Gayatri Mantra, and one person came to me and he said that if I do the Gayatri Mantra, then there will be more prosperity in my life, and things will be better in my life, and there'll be no pain and suffering in my life. So I said the Gayatri Mantra has only one aim: to take you towards the truth. You better be careful. If the money you have is an obstacle in your pathway to truth, then maybe because of the Gayatri Mantra, the money will go away. So you better be careful when you start doing the Gayatri Mantra. Only one aim in Gayatri Mantra: to reach the truth. And if in reaching that truth, money is going to be complementary, it may come from anywhere, right? But don't think that by doing the Gayatri Mantra, you're going to be win a lottery tomorrow. It's not possible. Or we may say by doing the Gayatri Mantra, there'll be no suffering in my life. But our inner, what do you call, soul is looking for suffering. So the minute we start doing the Gayatri Mantra, more suffering may come in our life, right? Because that is needed to, what do you call, take us into a higher state of consciousness. It works as the footsteps to higher states of consciousness. So, I mean, the effort that we put in for a higher state of consciousness does not guarantee a very comfortable and luxurious life. But if we can detach from luxury, if we can detach from comforts, then I can say at least one thing: life will be very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. That I can say from experience. Each moment will bring joy and happiness in whatever situation we are. Like I said, Swami Ram Dulare was one of my gurus. And one of his sayings was, he used to give one-liners all the time. And Prani matra sadhak hai or har paristhiti sadhana. Right? So the minute we start walking in this path, everything that comes to meet us in life is a stepping stone for higher consciousness. And it is this inner power of discriminating, that how do we face this situation in such a way that consciousness increases and I don't fall down on the ladder of consciousness. That inner vivek, that inner power of discrimination, as it grows within us, and it can only grow from the situations in life. It can only grow from the suffering in life, right? So I'm going to stop over here. It's 6 o'clock, and we'll take the what you call next sutra 14 next time, and we'll repeat this a little because what we said is a little of part of it is of the next sutra. If there are any questions, I'll take them now.
Can I please ask a question? Namaskar.
Yes, please go ahead.
Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar, Rajanji. Thank you so much for your wonderful knowledge, and we're really appreciating it so much. It's been a life changer. So, and of course, questions are all the time shooting because I'm always listening to your lectures from morning. Now, you just said, well, three things I had a little bit. That you said willpower, right, and spiritual will. So willpower is I want to change, right? If I just want to point it out. And spiritual power is I accept the will to change, is it? So I want to change and I accept the will to change. So I just want to clarify the spiritual will.
Some things are a little difficult to explain in English. I'll just... Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah.
I think somebody is unmute, I think. Now, I'll just explain in Gujarati a little first, if you don't mind.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Mari ichha ane eni ichha. Right?
Yeah.
When my desire is fulfilled, there is satisfaction. When his desire is fulfilled through me, there is joy. There is joy. Thy will be done. That is spiritual will. That is, I want to buy a new house is my desire.
Yeah.
Now, if I can wait and I understand, does he want to give me a new house? Right? And for that, you have to be in a different state. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? Now, I may say I want a new house, so immediately I go about building house, willpower. But if I have the power to pause my desire and see whether, circumstances bring his desire through me, then his desire and my desire go together. And when that happens, there is real joy in life, because now my ego is not in place. It is his desire working through me. So spiritual will has a different substance. It has a difference. And the first part of spiritual will is patience, is deep patience. And in willpower, there is always an urgency for change. There's always an urgency. I can do this. I can build factory. I can do this. So in outer life, I need will power. In inner life, I need will, what you call spiritual will. The power of endurance. The power of endurance. Now, supposing you just insult me and I can't even take a little bit of insult. I give it back to you immediately. Then do I have any patience or spiritual will? No, I don't have. But if I can endure that insult and I realize it is just words, electromagnetic impulses coming in, and I'm translating them, I'm decoding them as an insult. They could be decoded as something totally different. Can you get what I'm trying to say? Then that is spiritual will. And in spiritual will, you don't want to change the circumstances. You don't want to change anybody else. You change yourself. In willpower, I want to change you. Who are you to insult me? Better think about it next time, right? That is willpower. So there's a difference between spiritual will and willpower.
Okay. This thing was that regarding health, right?
Regarding?
Regarding health-wise, when we say I want good health, right? I want to be all right. If a person is sick and I want to be all right, that is now the will. So is it okay to keep on, the willpower to become healthy?
See, I'll tell you one thing.
Uh-huh.
That is the right use of willpower. That is the right use of willpower. There's another side to it, spiritual will. Now, supposing, I don't know what to say in English, but in Gujarati we say, "Ke a manas bo kach kach kare che." What do you say? Right?
What that one? Yeah, that's
Nagging, all the time nagging.
Yeah, you understand what I'm trying to say. I'll tell you, haven't put your cup properly, you've not taken out your shoes properly, you don't know how to dress up. I'm, finding fault all the time. Can you get it? Huh?
Right? Fault findings.
Right. Some things they cannot be explained so easily, right? Huh? Nagging, taunting, and that is my what do you call? Now tomorrow, supposing I fall ill, will this change or not change? Tell me.
It will. Yeah.
Now, is that illness positive or negative?
Positive.
It is positive.
Becomes positive.
So in spiritual will, I'll say suddenly that to change I would have to pass through so much of sadhana to be free of these conditionings of taunting everyone, giving it back to everyone. Suddenly all that has left me for this moment. I can look inside. Can you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So in spiritual will, I will look at it in a different way. Let me take another example. Supposing tomorrow I get cancer. Right? And the doctors say you've got 3 months. Right? Do what you want in 3 months. Now, will the intensity of my spiritual practices increase or decrease?
Increase.
They will increase 1,000 times.
Yeah,
right?
true.
You will say, come for my son's birthday party. I'll say, I don't have time to come for your son's birthday party. I'll sit down and do my Omkar or whatever I want to do. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? Right? So what I will achieve in 3 months, I may not achieve in a whole lifetime. Spiritual.
Very true.
Willpower, I will look for some other cure for the cancer. I'll look for something else for the cancer, or maybe there's some Tibetan medicine or some God knows other medicine, etc., etc. You understand?
Yeah,
what I'm trying
definitely.
to say?
Yeah, I do.
And both can be balanced. Both can be. I can look for a new cure. I can look for a new cure, but deep down I know that in these 3 months I've got to achieve it. Now I'll just give you another example. 7 years, Ramdulare Bapu, Swami Ramdulare was my guru. Right? Every small thing I used to ask him. Can you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
if tomorrow I want to go out from my home, I'll phone him. Hey, Bapu, can I go? He'll say, yes, you can go. If I want to change this glass from here to here, I'll phone him. Is it all right to put the glass over here? He'll say, yes, put the. So I'd become so dependent upon him. And then one day he was not there. And there was a big vacuum in my life. Can you get it? And then after, 6 years, I met Tawariya Sahib. And when I saw Tawariya Sahib, I said, whatever time I have with this person, before he goes, I must be walking on my own feet. Can you get what I'm saying? Because that old experience taught me. It taught me that with the Guru, you only have so much time. Right? Yeah. And in so much time, you want to achieve that. That is spiritual will. That is spiritual. That understanding comes. Spiritual will brings a certain understanding and acceptance of the situation.
Yeah, correct. That's true. Thank you so much. Thanks. Wonderful answer. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
No more questions? Huh?
So there is a question in Manas.
I practice 3 years or be at go to, but I can't hold it longer and again become what? What?
He practices 3 SRB at night to go in a semi-sleep state, but he cannot hold it for long. He falls to sleep.
Doesn't matter. Fall asleep. Don't worry. It will continue in your sleep for some time, and let it continue in your sleep for some time. Don't worry about that. Don't bring. This is a journey of free of tension. Don't bring tension where it is not needed. We enjoy the journey of spirituality. We are not carrying baggage. Oh, tomorrow I want to get enlightened. Don't carry that baggage. Right? Just enjoy each moment of what you're doing. Swati, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have a small question about the phase practices. Can I ask it, right?
Yeah, ask.
Okay, Thauriya Sahib recommended somewhere that you have to do it alternate days. So what is recommended? Like doing, pardon?
The phase exercises are done every alternate day. The refining is done every day. The phase exercises are done every alternate day.
So recommendation is alternate days.
And now that you have brought up the phase exercises, let me just add something over here. We took the meaning of abhyas, abhi, towards, us to throw. So when we are making what you call buttermilk out of curd, we are throwing out something. Can you see? So abhyas also talks about separating something and the ghee comes out. The clarified butter comes out. The higher substance comes out. So when you're talking about abhyas, you can also be talking about centrifugal force. So when we are doing the exercises in phases, we are rotating some things inside, giving centrifugal force. Many things are changing within us. It is like a form of abhyas also. Right? But the phase exercises have to be done on alternate days. Right.
Sorry, since you said about the phase exercise, I just want to come. You know, we do it 3 times, the whole set, phase 1. But sometimes due to time, if you just do it 2 times, is it okay? Like, because it's a 3 repetition. Instead of 3 repetition, it's 2 repetitions, okay. Or sometimes some students can get very tired with 3 repetitions, so only 2. Is it okay, or they have to finish the 3?
No, it is okay. It is
okay. Okay, thank you.
But I would like you to come to a state where you don't feel tired, but you feel more, what do you call, full of joy. Overflowing, rather than tired. So the more we do it in rhythm, then we don't feel tired.
Yeah. No, it's just some students who were doing with me. They said they in 2 times they felt. So I just wanted to clarify that. So I thought maybe okay, stop it 2 times. If you're tired, stop it 2 times. But in the actual sense, you're right. Students feel tired. Yeah, no. No. Sometimes, yeah. Okay. Or because time-wise as well, sometimes somebody's in a rush, just do it 2 times and then not complete the 3rd, because it takes 45 minutes, one phase.
Yes.
So that's why. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, somebody else raised their hand. I don't know.
Yes, Sajiduddin, you have to ask your video so that I can pin you.
Yeah, hello, Rajan sir.
Please, go ahead.
Actually, I'm concerned with the time. You mentioned that time is a present moment. So can we relate this present moment to the conception that we have in Western philosophy about the presentism of time? Or we have the conception that we get from Advaita Vedanta, where time is a moment, time is eternal now. So what's your take on it? Thank you, sir.
No. You have to see time from different angles. Right? And how is time created for us? So for us, time is created by the 5 senses taking a photograph. And the photograph is given to the mind, which we call it the present moment. The mind starts joining the present moments and creates a line of time. You understand? This present moment was previous, this present moment is now, and this present moment is coming. It joins the present moments and creates a line of time. So that is one way of looking at time. But time is also an energy. And this is very difficult to understand. Time as an energy. So we are born because of sex energy. We die because of death energy. Right? Now, if death energy and sex energy are the same, then the moment of death is the moment of birth. The time is the same. Now, this is because we are so conditioned to hours and minutes and this flow of linear time, it is very difficult for us to understand time as energy. Right? So we have to look at time in different concepts. Right? Time is light. Right? Because light takes time to reach us. If I'm seeing a star in the sky, that star may or may not be there. I'm looking at it millions of years ago. You get? Because the light of that star is reaching me after 1 million years. So wherever there is light, the law of time comes in. So when you look at time, you have to look at time from different angles. And there are different kinds of time, right? So there's the time from birth to death. But there's parallel time, birth to death, birth to death, birth to death, parallel time. And above that, there is another time. Right? Or you could look at time from the possibility of possibilities. Can you see this spoon is over here? This spoon is over here. And I put it over here. So from here to here, I've drawn one line of time. But when the spoon was over here, I could have done so many things with it. I could have thrown it away there. I could have done so many things with it. So all those possibilities are lying in some time. One possibility actualized, the others are still lying somewhere else. Can you see? So then we look at it as a different time. So time, it's very difficult. We have to look at it from so many angles. Yeah. And unless we slowly rise to a higher state of consciousness, we are not able to grasp the what do you call that time is something which is always there. There is nothing like past and future. It is like a three-dimensional space, a three-dimensional time. Now say I'm going on the road in a car, right? So I'm in the car, I've finished this road is the past, this road is coming is the future. But if I'm on top of a mountain, past, future and present for the car is just one line. Can you get it? So as I rise in consciousness, time changes for me. My understanding of time changes. Can you get what I'm trying to say? So we have to approach time from many, many different angles. Maybe someday I'll take a talk on time itself. We can talk about it.
It would be wonderful, yeah, if we have a whole lecture on time. It's in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, time I am. So,
Pardon?
and that was in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, time
Right.
I am. But it's very difficult to understand that people think time I am means just this time. If you give us in detail one whole class or a couple of classes on time, would be wonderful, please.
Okay, we'll do.
Thanks. Thank you.
Right. Sure, that's it, I think.
Any more questions?
One on
I
the
don't
chat.
think so, sir. Nothing in the chat also.
Thank you. Thanks.
हेमा जी मैं एक छोटी सी चीज पूछना चाहता हूँ। उन्होंने स्वामी राम दुलारे जी से एक बताया था कि प्राणी मात्रेण, वो पूरा मैं सुन नहीं पाया।
प्राणी मात्र साधक है और हर परिस्थिति साधक है। साधना साधक।
हाँ, समझ गया।
हाँ, और हर परिस्थिति साधना।
Sir, there is a
साधु हर परिस्थिति साधु है या
साधक सीकर
नो प्राणी मात्र साधक है और हर परिस्थिति साधु है या साधक
साधना है
sadhana.
Oh, sorry. I wrote sadhu. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Not Sadhana, the actress. Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
There is a question by Manas Upadhyay. What will happen if we do it daily, the phase 4 exercise?
You know, when we have an infection in the body or some organ of the body is disturbed, we go to a doctor and the doctor gives us an antibiotic, right? And the antibiotic has a half-life. So he'll say you take 1 dose in the morning and 1 dose in the evening, but there must be an 8-hour gap between the 2 doses of antibiotic, right? And I'll say, no, but I want to cure my disease early. I'll take it 4 times in this thing. But he says that won't work. This is the way the antibiotic has to be administered. Similarly, the phase exercises is in a different time. You can't say I'll do it every day. You can only do it on alternate days. It works because once you have done it, you have to give those chakras which it has affected rest for 48 hours before you do it again. If you again, excite those chakras within those 48 hours, then you're going to create imbalances and problems. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. We meet next Tuesday. Thanks a lot. Would you like to say any sloka?
Yes, God sir has some work, so he has left. So I will
I'll just say the sloka.
Yes, yes, sir, please.
Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karvavahi, tejasvina vadetamastu, ma vidvishavahi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you.